James is right at the sharp edge of figuring out whether this is indeed the future of people leadership. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Felix. Great to be here.
So I guess the biggest question is, how's it going?
Learning curve, for sure. I think I'm really fortunate. I've got a great head of IT, and I think I'm taking it in steps. At the core of this, it's how do we keep the business safe from an IT point of view. There's a lot happening in the marketplace around cyber attacks, but also how do we really just make sure that the IT infrastructure serves the business as is now. I think as we go forward, though, that's the interesting bit about how we kind of look at people strategy, IT strategy, and the kind of almost overlap of that. And that's something we're just starting. I think after a few months, we haven't really quite got there, but we're kind of feeling our way through it.
Well, I think now we're getting into the realm of what impact do you think AI is going to have on the workforce, on organisational structures?
I mean, I suppose the simple answer is it's definitely going to have an impact. And I think it's hard at the moment to kind of be really quite concrete around it. My expectation is that job design will change. I think AI has to be able to make individuals more efficient. I think there's still quite a lot of processes that happen today that could be done by AI. I think actually what it will do is also start breaking down some of the traditional silos that we've had between functions. I'm interested to really think about where AI might go as well. I mean, we're on a bit of a crest of a wave around what the potential could be, but I suppose it's really predicated on data and AI's access and use of data. At the moment, it's scraping a lot of free data. I kind of wonder whether that also will change over time, because it must have impacts to business processes where footfall in certain websites are starting to fall because actually it's not a person going into that in terms of sales funnel versus an AI agent doing that.
This episode is brought to you by Instant Impact. Instant Impact provides transformative talent solutions to small and mid-sized companies that are making between 30 and 500 hires each year. If your recruitment's giving you a headache and you don't know where to start, then give the team at Instant Impact a call or visit www.instant-impact.com for more information. Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About HR. I'm your host, Felix Mitchell. Now, we're living in a fascinating period where sands are shifting under us with every second. Everything seems to be changing, even the traditional boundaries of where HR begins and where it ends. People leaders have found themselves responsible not just for the employee life cycle, but also for the technology, the systems that shape every different employee touch point. Today's guest is living that reality in full, I think it's fair to say. James Edgar is the Chief People Officer at Signature Discovery, a private equity-backed drug discovery business, and he's leading a team of over 1,000 people across the UK and Canada. Just a few months ago, he expanded his people leadership responsibilities and took over leading the IT function as well, which means that he's both responsible for people strategy and for the technology infrastructure that enables it. It's a fascinating experiment in org design, and James is right at the sharp edge of figuring out whether this is indeed the future of people leadership. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Felix. Great to be here.
So I guess the biggest question is, how's it going?
Learning curve, for sure. Yeah, learning curve for sure. I think I'm really fortunate. I've got a great head of IT, and I think I'm taking it in steps. The business is going through quite a lot of flux. And so at the core of this, it's how do we keep the business safe from an IT point of view. There's a lot happening in the marketplace around cyber attacks. But also how do we really just make sure that the IT infrastructure serves the business as is now. I think as we go forward, though, that's the interesting bit about how we kind of look at people strategy, IT strategy, and the kind of almost overlap of that. And that's something we're just starting. I think after a few months, we haven't really quite got there, but we're kind of feeling our way through it.
Well, I think as with anything else, I think, and taking on any role, a lot of, first of all, you're sort of figuring out what's going on, then you're cleaning up what's happened, and then you get to do, what you actually want to do.
That's true.
How are you prioritizing at the moment?
Oh, good question.
This isn't an exec coaching session.
No. I sort of start leaning back and enjoying it. No, I think there is a bit about where we're at the moment is trying to keep this business safe, both from a people point of view. So have we got the right resources, capabilities for the challenges we've got right now? And then from an IT point of view, actually, do we have the right infrastructure to make sure that people can do the best and, as I say, kind of protect the business? And so there's quite a lot going into that, and it feels quite dynamic at the moment. There's a lot being seen in the press, with big names around cyber attacks. And so it feels a very live threat. And our business has gone through phenomenal amounts of growth. And so there's an element of trying to put the basics in place for the business that we are now versus the business we were two years ago. So there's still quite a lot around governance, around structure, security that we're kind of working through. But like most other businesses, I guess, we're still early in the phase of really thinking through where can technology take us and what some of the implications of that. And unlike, not unlike most other businesses, I guess the challenge of AI, where do we want to go with that?
Oh, we're going to get onto that, James,
Sure.
in a bit. Before we do, I think I guess having to worry about things like cyber attacks feels so far away from the normal from the normal remit of an HR leader, people leader. Is it? Or has it been pretty, have you found some useful crossovers?
Yeah, I think the way I describe it is, I suppose, in a lot of the roles that I've been in, I've been used to being part of a leadership team where you're starting to think through, I don't know, crisis management or business continuity. So there's an element that feels familiar. I think the prevalence of cyber attack and how that's evolving feels very new, though, and it continues to evolve. So that is something that feels like I'm still learning the way through it. I suppose there's one trite answer that says, actually, in a business continuity situation, I'm now starting to learn I'm the person that has both remits rather than just the one. Before it was much easier to think about the people implications, but I actually think IT and people are starting to become intertwined much more than it ever has before. So it feels a kind of natural extension as we kind of learn through it. So still more to do.
Yeah, and it does feel like this is becoming one of many potential futures for the function, to have a sort of remit across how work gets done, rather than how people do work or how software does work as two separate entities. Is it feeling comfortable?
No, I don't think. I suppose, the obvious answer is change doesn't really feel comfortable, but it feels necessary. So the shift, if I put my people hat on, some of the shift that we've been trying to do is really think quite holistically about what's the service that we want to provide our employees and what's the employee value proposition. So what's the EVP that really makes Signature different? I think when you look at EVPs now, it's not just a functional lens, though. As someone kind of walks in, it becomes what's the touch points that the company has. That's not always the HR function. And so I think there's a natural extension into, day one, what's the IT provision? Does it work? Is it easy to get into systems, other systems? That's all part of an employee experience that isn't, in the traditional sense, a HR thing. And so, actually part of the remit of bringing IT in here, and I think actually what we'll find over time is also facilities, is how do we really start looking holistically around employee experience that helps validate what we're saying is our EVP and is the lived experience. So it feels uncomfortable because we're breaking silos down, we're having different conversations, and also we're very early in the kind of journey of understanding employee experience, employee journey mapping, etc.
I think just to bring it back to that point around the what impacts an EVP, I really do expect a company's tech stack to become a bigger and bigger differentiator. You look at some of the we were talking before about some of the work we're doing in AI transformation and instant impact. You look at some of if you did a before and after comparison of a company that is still struggling to figure out which Copilot to use, which we're using Copilot, we're using ChatGPT, we're using Claude, whatever, versus one that really has embedded AI agents supporting different workflows and processes, versus one that's truly, rewired in an AI native sense. The experience of the employee at each of those different three companies is massive.
Huge.
you've got one person who's copying copying and pasting data between different like 5 different tabs, and you've got one person at the end of it who's spending their days like launching new agentic processes. I
Yeah.
mean, like two different kettles of fish. So I think that's fascinating shift, isn't it?
It is, and I think when you can start unpacking that. So on one level, it's actually what's it feel like for the employee, and this kind of rhetoric around war for talent, it does become an impact actually when you see choice of employees. If someone comes into a fairly archaic, very admin focused role, when they've got the alternative of what you've just described here, it's quite hard to kind of see that kind of comparison not make an impact in their choice. Then you unpack another level that says, actually, what's the impact that has on people's capabilities, and what's the organisational capabilities that you need to have? Then you unpack it again, which is actually what's that free up, what's that kind of change, and then this bigger thing around how do you monetize some of that. You've got this massive range, and that's where I think certainly we are very embryonic, but that's where it gets incredibly exciting in terms of where the opportunities are. And so, if I think about this kind of partnership of HR and IT, I think there's something at a kind of very base level of actually how do you really think about that holistically from an employee point of view, but from an organizational point of view, actually, what's the opportunities and frankly must-haves actually now in the environment we have, that we really need to think about what the future is. And so there's so much to go at.
Well, I think now we're getting into the realm of what what impact do you think AI is going to have on the workforce, on organizational structures?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose the simple answer is it's definitely going to have an impact. And I think it's hard at the moment to kind of be really quite concrete around it. My expectation is that job design will change. I think AI has to be able to make individuals more efficient. I think there's still quite a lot of processes that happen today that could be done by AI. I think actually what it will do is also start breaking down some of the traditional silos that we've had between functions. I'm interested to really think about where AI might go as well. I mean, we're on a bit of a crest of a wave around what the potential could be, but I suppose it's really predicated on data and AI's access and use of data. At the moment, it's scraping a lot of free data. I kind of wonder whether that also will change over time, because it must have impacts to business processes where footfall in certain websites are starting to fall because actually it's not a person going into that in terms of sales funnel versus an AI agent doing that. So I do wonder where some of this comes. But
Well, I've got a little story for you, which might you were in the sort of media world before paid search. Do I remember that right?
Yeah.
So a friend of mine works for one of the big newspapers, one of the ones with a bigger digital presence. She was telling me that AI has been really detrimental to their business model because people don't click into articles anymore.
Yeah.
They just look at what the AI is presenting them with. So they're losing their ad revenue, which is, who would have seen that coming 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And I just, as you say, the way that we use the internet feels like it's going to fundamentally, or is fundamentally shifting, and that's going to have a whole load of knock-on implications.
And I know that we're in a kind of point in time, but I also think there's a bit about AI is going to be incredibly helpful for people who know what they're looking for. So in a lot of the experience that we've had, certainly, is taking quite manual process and taking some of the time out, but you still have to have a level of expertise to know where there's failings in what's being produced by AI.
Yeah.
I suppose one of the concerns is actually how do you keep that skill set going when more and more reliance goes on to AI, and actually with new generations coming into the workforce, how will they learn it to know whether it's working or not?
My dad, who's in his 80s, early 80s, he'd like me to say, he said, Felix, it's funny, they were saying exactly the same thing about the calculator when we shifted over from the slide rule. He was like, they'll figure it out, and you get a new way of working, and sure, people are worse at mental arithmetic now, but we figure it out.
Yeah, and I think that's, where's that shift going to be?
Yeah.
So there's blatantly going to be a shift, right? So it's trying to work through some of that shift, and I think it kind of opens up all sorts of different opportunities in terms of, what would be a traditional career, what would be a traditional work day, what's going to be a traditional organisation. Actually, I think again, it's going to be quite blurry. So, if we come back to what we were describing before, if you kind of unpack this, it has reams and reams of opportunity and change, and some stuff that we don't even see right now. And I'm quite conscious about maybe the safety and security of information. That we had an example given actually by a company. I think we're going for a patent license, and they had used an AI tool to help with the presentation and the kind of submission of all the documentation, but not realised that actually by using the AI tool, it's now freely accessible by others.
Oh gosh.
And then they failed their patent license application because it was found that it was readily available, and so as a result, it's not their intellectual property. So I think we're also going to learn some mistakes as we go through this. Some of them are going to be quite huge, and we're seeing that a bit with clients already. There's a real reticence from clients around freedom of information and how you protect that, and where does that sit with AI. So I think there's some interesting challenges still to be kind of figured out as we work through this.
So I find this sort of figuring out of challenges piece really interesting from the seat that you must sit in right now, because at a really reductive level, it feels like with the power of both IT and people function, do you feel like you're more agile, or you could be more agile to deal with those sorts of test and learn situations than you would have been before?
Oh, that's a really good question. The driver in me that says I'd like to be more agile. I think this is kind of relentless hunger to kind of keep going. I think if I think about the kind of experience that I have now, that test and learn piece is definitely coming through as a trait and theme of actually kind of operating in the environment that we're in. That it existed, but it feels more prominent for me right now. But then again, I fast forwards, and I think we're going to have to create cultures and environments where we can be more agile than we are today to kind of cope with some of the disruptive change coming.
Yeah, and I guess maybe the subtext of the original question I was going for is, sometimes I will find that one function's desire to change can come up against obstacles from another.
Okay.
Particularly between IT and the people function, right? You want to roll out a new EVP or employee lifecycle picture, and you don't have the right technology for it, or IT says that we can't bring in that tech, or on the flip side of it, IT say, look, it's time to do a complete rewrite of the people stack, or we want to move to a ERP that covers everything, and you're saying, no, it's going to be bad. So I wonder whether just actually having one decision-making lead has been, or do you think will be useful?
I think it will be useful. Means I'm arguing with myself, right? In certain ways, but I think
depends on the person.
Yeah, okay. I think it will help. Yeah, I do think it will help, and I suppose there's been a natural point around. One of the things I've kind of learned in my career is it's not about being siloed. There's going to be massive amounts of partnership with the HR function, with IT, with marketing, with communications, even with finance. So that continues. I think what's interesting is actually seeing how we can co-create some of this going forward, because both arms are under me. That feels a bit different. Yeah, I also think there's a piece around actually how can it work together, because there are going to, like most things in most companies, it's a bit of a trade-off to try and get there. So I think now there's a slightly different way that we can kind of really work through some of those trade-offs and have those decisions. I mean, the other bit that comes with the remit that I've got is also a bit of a change angle. So I'm also the board sponsor for our ERP implementation. So that naturally has some elements from an IT partnership, but it is also having impacts to changing job design for our commercial and finance teams as well. So again, that kind of Venn diagram feels like there's more and more overlapping as we go through some of these changes to the company.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And how about, I mean, you were talking about working together. What have you done with the teams? Is there overlap? Have you kept them separate?
At the moment, there's it's pretty separate. We're starting to do stuff, and I think there'll be more where we can kind of overlap and kind of come together. But as I say, it's been quite early days. So I actually have kind of three arms, but we are seeing it kind of converge. So the change and IT bit there is quite a strong crossover.
Mhm.
We are doing quite a lot of work in the HR function to look through our tech stack and where we want the tech stack to be. So that's naturally creating synergy with the IT function, but I can only see that going further. We've got a great relationship, and actually, to be honest, we've been enabled in some of the stuff we've wanted to do in the EVP because of the IT function, not in spite of. They've created, our ability to have a platform that connects everyone together, and that's through kind of upsell or negotiation did on a license fee. So actually, I don't want to make it sound like it's adversarial. I think actually it could be quite additive as well.
Yeah, and look, I think that's probably the case. I think that's probably the case with most businesses. I just sort of think sometimes there are those different priorities that sort of occur naturally.
Yeah.
And some companies, they are adversarial, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I'm really fortunate I'm not in that.
excellent.
But I think there's other bit about, when I think about the business itself and the maturity of the business, we've been around for about 20 years. But again, because of the rapid growth over the last maybe 6 or 8, there's still a bit around how do we act like a business that size.
Yeah.
And so I think there's also this kind of groundswell, and we need to be really careful about this, but how do we put the right governance in place? And that's not just a HR and IT bit, but again, when I look at ISO standards for information security, and as we start developing AI, what's the kind of governance that we want to put in for AI is going to be really, really important. So I think there's a kind of balancing act around making sure we've got the right level of governance that then doesn't create suffocation. And again, having a people lens linked to that, I'm hoping will actually have some benefits as we go through that.
Yeah, I'll bet. And I'd be interested to explore this change remit that you have as well. The more and more I think about it, the more I think that change is kind of the natural, it's the natural middle ground between people and technology, isn't it? With the business growing really quickly, with functions blurring and with AI coming in, how do you make sure that the organization can keep up with change, that adoption happens, that you don't get exhausted by the level of shift?
I think we're still writing that, if I'm honest.
Give me the answer.
Yeah, I would love it. I would love it. I still think we're writing that. I think when you look at the context of the business, because we're private equity backed, as you mentioned, there is this kind of natural speed of growth that comes with a lot of that. And I think, I think about signature. If I kind of compare signature to a human, I often say that we don't feel like a 20-year-old. We feel more like a teenager. So there are kind of guard rules that I think we need to put in place, but too many strict rules feels like the teenager's going to rebel against it. And I think as we get more complex, so the more people we have, the fact that we're on, 2 different time zones, we're across 10 or 11 different sites, we're getting to a scale now where actually change has a bigger downstream or upstream impact to other functions. When you're small, it's easier, I think, because you're in a smaller group, it's easier to have that communication. We're now having to kind of almost operationalize some of the stuff that was just inherent as we're small. So we're, I think, learning that. I think part of the change muscle that we're trying to develop is actually what's the signature way? What is it that we need to equip people with? How do we start really thinking about some of those interdependencies? And then, we're in a climate now where actually it's hard. There's lots of macro environments where we're gonna have to be more choiceful about the resources that we've got. So I think there's a bit here when it comes to the change where, in our business in particular, to make change happen, it's going to have to be around what's the change, but the adoption by our people, and even more so the kind of technology bit that kind of underpins that. So the change control or kind of oversight, I think, will actually start merging into a more holistic way of thinking about change, and hopefully that will go forward. That the art is not making it too bureaucratic.
Yeah, I guess you've got that line to tread, don't you, between having enough process to maintain culture and consistency as you grow, and then agility is also just so important.
Yeah, super important. And again, Signature's history has been that rapid growth has been a mixture of organic and inorganic, and so we're also in a state where actually that culture is one of the headaches. I guess is actually how do we keep a signature culture that people still feel the agility, but that we have one culture rather than lots of legacy smaller cultures.
What would you say is the business's appetite for change? Because I think it's something that a lot of companies are are struggling with right. I mean, even instant impact. We're under 100 people, so
Yeah.
you'd think we'd be able to keep up a rapid pace of change, and we do. But I mean, since COVID, it's just been nuts, non-stop, and it feels like it's going to be accelerating, not reducing. So one of the questions we're always asking ourselves is, how do we gear our team up to be ready to change, happy to change, excited about change, and sort of accept it as part of the job? But we don't have scientists. I think that's helpful.
I mean, again, I think it's quite...
Nothing against scientists, by the way. Good smoke. I was going to say, granddad was a scientist, brother's a doctor. I think that's kind of a similar thing. But there's often a sort of desire to focus on the work, right?
Yeah. And that's got to be paramount for our business, right? Because our business is the work that we do for our clients, and the work that is done is because of the quality of the people that we've got. So I think on one side, I would say that we have a business that actually goes through incredible amounts of change just because how dynamic drug discovery is. So there's already a latent level of change, and trying to find new breakthroughs is not something that just happens overnight. It is trying a lot of things, trying innovation. I think the challenge for us is almost a change on change as we go through, growing up, as we go through kind of operationalizing some of that. We do have risks of change fatigue, and I think there is a danger that it's very quick in this environment. It's very easy, in this environment to go to the next change without embedding the last bit. And if I'm really honest, I don't know we've always done that well. Part of the muscle that I think we're trying to work through here is what is that almost continual improvement, where we can just at an end of a project say what's the lessons learned, what we're taking from it, so that we don't make the same mistakes again and try and improve that. We've done a bit of that with some of our post-acquisition integrations. We've done that a tiny bit with some of our ERP launches, and so it's trying to build that kind of muscle memory of actually how do we just take some time out to learn from it, so we're not repeating the same mistakes. I think that's where frustration comes, right?
Yes, I believe it. I mean, in a business where innovation and discovery is literally the name, are there good frameworks that you can take from the academic or drug discovery world that you can apply?
There are bits that I think we can. I suppose a lot of the drug discovery process is pretty laid out, and I think there are times when I would say almost the psyche of the scientist is an adjustment. Certainly for me, coming out of other sectors and first time into life sciences, the nature of drug discovery is very precise, and so
well, you have
well, as a scientist, you have you want to know what the process is. You want to know that actually this works or it doesn't. There is no grey. If I come away from the science, though, a lot of the change that we're doing at organisational level is in the grey. It's really hard to find the black and whites, and as things change, it's trying to navigate that. So I think we have a big task around engagement and how we keep people engaged and understand that. And there's also a learning curve for all of us as we go through this.
So I don't want to end the podcast without talking about AI and what it means for you and the business and your functions and everything. So we've spoken about the data security and the compliance and the safety elements of it. How does your seat allow you to get a better picture on the vision and the milestones to make the most out of this cool new tech?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose again, being part of the board, it's kind of intrinsic in the company strategy, and the way I describe our approach to it, it is early, but we have the full range. We're starting to look at how do we really deploy AI in terms of the culture of getting people to adopt it, understanding some of the parameters of it, and how do we start looking at almost bottom-up way of making everyone's lives a bit easier and a bit more efficient using it. There's also a bit of, as I say, thinking about from the organisational point of view, what's the impacts this might have around job design, org design, etc. And then if I go into the science world, it's been quite hotly debated around what's the role of AI in things like computational chemistry or the kind of discovery process. We've seen businesses that have basically pitched themselves using tech as almost a substitute for labs and people. I think our belief is that it will play a part, but I don't think it's in absence of labs and people. I think there's a combination of it. So we now start getting into much more of a, how do we deploy it in drug discovery and monetize it? So we have AI tools that we currently use as signature for the discovery process. We're starting to build much more partnership with other firms to start actually looking at where we can go with some of this. And so we're kind of feeling our way through all of that piece, both in terms of internal but also external.
That's really interesting. Doesn't DeepMind have a drug discovery
It
spin-off?
does. It does. Yeah, it does quite a lot in terms of trying to use that. And I think, like I say, it's creating a huge amount of data that will be helpful. I think the big bit is actually how do you kind of look at the data and actually capture the data in the right way that will be useful for AI. And you're seeing much more prevalence of it, but in kind of pockets. I think it still feels a bit early to kind of prove that it is the right thing to do versus, like I say, wet labs and people.
But the first time that people have really, or one of the first times that people have really looked at a viable alternative or complementary line, right? So it's,
yeah, and I think, like I say, you can see other firms that are trying to do it, but they've all struggled in this kind of market, so it's not quite been the answer yet. There's something in it, blatantly, but we're still trying to work through, and I think there will be some kind of blended solution here.
very interesting. Well, we will stay tuned on what happens there, but I'm afraid that's all we've got time for.
No problem. So
James,
very quick.
I've got to say, good luck with the rest of the experiment. I think we should probably check in a few months' time and just make sure that everything's going. But it feels intuitively, and from the experiment so far, feels like a pretty powerful combo.
Hope so. Let's see.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Felix.